All things happen for the best. What do we make of this old wives' tale, this common myth that seems to hurt so much when we're in the many painful events that life in our world, in our culture, presents? And in the back of my mind, just cleaning out the house and walking around, I began to have an inkling, which I wanted to get down because this has been something that irritates me a great deal when friends or other people have suggested it, particularly when very wrong things are going on. It's very painful to bring up childhood abuse, and hear that, well, it's for the best, that Catholic priests rape young boys, etc., etc. So here's a flavor of this, and I want to begin by saying that if you or anyone else is in a lot of pain and can do anything about it to relieve and or distribute that pain. Now, both is positive. It's not healthy for one individual to serve as the fulcrum of a concentration of pain caused by a great number of people. It's not good for a couple of reasons. One reason it's not good is that when one individual serves as that fulcrum, everyone else who is causing the pain doesn't feel the pain and is therefore getting a faulty message. What I mean is we learn in part through pain. So I stick my finger out, I hit my finger with a hammer, and there's pain. And so I don't hit my finger again, at least intentionally. The trouble is, in life, there are many situations where I stick my finger out, I hit it with a hammer, and somebody else's finger hurts. I'm causing the pain, and I may even feel better, but someone else feels an extraordinary amount of pain. Now, when that happens, for example, I steal something, someone else doesn't make money. As a result of not making money, they can't make their lease payment. As a result of not making their lease payment, they lose their business. As a result of losing their business, they're on the street. I steal something, they're on the street. In this kind of situation, it's a little bit less easy to see from my perspective how it's wrong to steal, because I have something after all. And so one of the reasons when we're in an ecology where a lot of different people collude in often, very politically correct ways. I didn't murder someone. I just bought a item of clothing from the worst safety-rated clothing manufacturer in the world. A clothing manufacturer who routinely participates in child labor, a certain number of whom drop dead every year in the factory, etc., etc. I don't kill people. I just stay ignorant and buy the cheapest item. When pain is distributed, and of course the distributors who sell that don't take any interest in that factory floor either, and neither does the government of that country. But it all ends up on the person who first must decide whether to be unemployed or work in one of these sweat labors factories, and then must decide between losing their job and speaking up about the safety issues, And when they speak up about the safety issues, they are then ignored. And finally, they're dead. And everyone else, the owner of the company has factored this in. A certain number of deaths per year, a certain number of bribes to pay off the debt, and they're still going to make a profit. So the company is coming out a winner. And then the distributor is coming out a winner because everyone wants to buy cheap items in countries that define themselves as capitalist, which means a capitalist country is a country that measures success by capital. It says, I turned $1 into $2. I'm a capitalist, and I'm a winner of the capitalist game. Well, the easiest way to win in the capitalist game is to disregard human beings. It's quite simple. Because when you disregard human beings as opposed to upgrading buildings and air quality and this and that and the other, you can manufacture things in certain situations at lower prices. And when you're selling to a capitalist, that's all they care about. The quality, the thread count, etc., and the price. And then the people buying it are comfortable because they saved money. So everyone is saving money or making money on the shoulders of a dead child. This is concentrating the pain but distributing the value. This is an evil system because the one person who does not get the value and who is essential in that whole matrix is the child. The child loses their innocence, the child loses their health, the child loses their humanity, and the child loses their life, so that everyone else who likes to pay lip service to blah, 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 can feel like a great Christian, blah, 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 but a shrewd great Christian who shops for the lowest price, right, and didn't get ripped off by anyone, and certainly not by anyone who actually hired ethical labor. So we have this, these are the kinds of things that we are furious about. And to hear that this is happening for the best, that in fact all we need is to lower safety regulations around the world to have uneducated populations produce more children for slave labor and perhaps even the sex trade, and the economies will boom. That's all we need. And so clearly this was happening for the best. This is the kind of, anger, bitterness, and disgust that, has had me very angry at this kind of, anyone who says these statements is a cheap cop-out for doing something about profound justices and evils in our world. So that's easy to articulate. I think most people can understand that in chauvinistic, in sociopathic, and in many cases in capitalistic cultures, the pain is concentrated on the people who need the most support and will do anything, and thus they are exploited, the young, the elderly, etc. Now, that's not what I was thinking about today. And so, what I want to shift to is what I think is behind that statement that things happen for the best. So here's another matrix, another tapestry. The first part of this tapestry comes in the form of an experience and a belief. An experience and a belief that when I suffer, when I'm in pain, when I'm in shame, when I'm in trauma, etc., I'll call it luminous presence presents itself to me at times. images of beauty, images of healing, healing energy, healing love, kindness. I'll just call it luminous presence. And I think it's fair to say that without a certain amount of that, I'd be dead, and maybe we all would. I'm not sure, exactly on a scientific basis what we can say about dreams, but I know that in the last couple of nights, when I was semi-awake, angelic presences, and I'll say that I don't mean all the Christian overtones and all that, and I'm not trying to capture or dogmatize the imagery I have. I kind of think that mathematical resonance presents itself to the human brain, which filters it into the mythologies of the culture and individual of that human brain. But let's just say again, luminous presence. You can say divine presence, you can say spiritual energy, whatever you want to call it. But if we look at it through an evolutionary paradigm, if we look at it through a mathematical paradigm, the first thing that we see about reality is there are continuums, and that there are, at least in practical terms, no absolute. If you could say, you can't say 1,000,000 volts is the highest volt you can be. You can go to 1,000,001 volts, 1,000,002 volts, 2,000,000 volts, 369 billion volts, 3,000,000,008. We're on a continuum. And while we sometimes say zero is, the absolutely no electricity. First of all, if you get sensitive enough measurements, you may be able to pick up a certain amount of electrical charge almost anywhere, number one. Number two, you can then go into negative, voltage and stuff where it flips the other way and goes on infinite. You have infinite white, you have infinite black. Whatever it is that's on these continuums, happiness, there's always a little bit happier, there's always a little bit more pain. So most of reality is not in an absolute, this is perfect, this is hell. It's more hell than it was yesterday, and it's more perfect than we've known so far. And if things continue in that trajectory, it's super perfect, next year. So there's these continuums. And if we understand that much, if not all, of reality is on these continuums, particularly evolution, where we might say a human being is more evolved than an ape, a dolphin is more evolved than a sea bass, or, that there's these evolutionary continuums of brain complexity, for example. It's profoundly arrogant to assume that we are the perfect or the pinnacle of any evolutionary continuum. We may be the peak of the visible mammalian continuum on this particular planet of the estimated 1 billion or more livable or planets that support some form of life, in our vague constructs of how far space is, which, as I say, are constructs, they're stories. We haven't been out 300 million light years from now to be able to say we've got working models. We're fairy tale artists, and our fairy tales, we just try and form a sense of integrity, which we really do in mathematics. In mathematical formulation, what we're looking for is integrous equations. We're looking for models of reproducing our idea of the probability field of all that is, that have consistent, integrous symmetry. That if this were true and this were true, it would suggest this was true. And oh my goodness, it is true. Wonderful. We're getting somewhere. And then if that's true and this was true and this true and it looks like this, that we start to form a theory of a strong model. But it's very important to differentiate the model from reality. The model that comes up with the words light year, little mouth noises, la 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 la. Someone else is saying it in Arabic. It's different. It has nothing to do with the sound. These are models. The model of language, the model of measurements. There are other systems of measurements. Some measurements can happen we go from 1 to 10 and then we start over again with 11 starting as a 1. There are other number systems that start over again at 15 and others that start over again. And there's literally 280 numbers and then they start over at 280. Then the 281 becomes the 1 and it goes around in that way. There are a very large system of increments. And so our term light year is not a light year. It is a concept that we understand through language that gives us a very vague and often completely inaccurate sense of what a light year is. Meaning what we're trying to capture is the experience of getting into a ship, traveling at the speed of light for a year, and saying, what was that? So a year later, traveling at the speed of light through who knows what direction. And we can say that, that's a light year. But no, it isn't, because your light year, you were heading in that direction. You were depressed during your light year. You didn't know what was going to happen. Your light year was completely different from my light year. You were miserable, so your light year seemed to take 20 years. My light years seemed to take, a few days. It was so amazing, and this was happening, and that was happening. So we have not captured the emotion of the year, the direction of the year, the experiences of the year, the sounds of the year. What if we travel at half the speed of light, and so it takes us 2 years to get to 1 light year? Well, that's still traveling a light year in distance, but now it's taken 2 years. So what I'm getting at is these are models of reality. The speed of light, a light year. And the models don't even hold up very well. And as Rupert Sheldrake points out, when the speed of light speeds up and then slows down and then speeds up again, and then nobody knows what's going on, so they hush it all up and just give a constant. That's the average of all those speeds, and this is the speed of light, and please don't confuse us with the data. So we don't even have that. But there is in evolutionary and in scientific terms, the whole premise of science is the ambition of what's called the grand unified theory. Now, the grand unified theory is the mathematical equation that makes complete sense of everything throughout time, that can predict everything throughout time, and that has symmetry, meaning it holds up over here and it holds up over here. It holds up in the future and it holds up in the past. This is the grand dream of every scientist, to be able to say, well, the cuckoo hooted, over on the tree, and it hooted, and that hoot means this, and the tree will fall down in exactly 76.5 years because at that very moment a tornado will come in, and this and that and the other, and yes, you calculated it, it predicted accurately, and this would occur. This is the grand unified theory. And we're moving in that direction, meaning every year we're able to predict certain things with more predictability, with more certainty. We're able to say, well, this tiny little microchip can actually hold 250 gigs of camera stuff, except a certain percentage of them still don't. Where's my camera footage? Oh, I guess you got a corrupted card. Well, what do you mean a corrupted card? You made them all the same. You shipped them all the same. Where's my photo footage? Well, it's missing. Where's it gone? It's like, where's it? So, but high quality, all these different things, it's a little bit more reliable. So we don't have a grand unified theory. Science is incredibly weak as a narrative to explain all things, but we can say for sure that we know more things, or at least we think we do, than we did a few hundred years ago, and that we've been using this model of trying to aim for evidence-based symmetry and correlation between theory and data and actual result, and data over here and data over there. But there's tons of things we don't even test for because it doesn't occur to us. I mean, we haven't done tests to see if certain scientific experiments perform differently for women than for men. If a woman scientist does it, because we say, what do you mean? That's not how the world works, so we don't even test for it. You see, but this is a very self-selecting process. But anyway, aside from the scientific model, mathematics is a language of complexity and nuance, and it's infinitely nuanced. Kind of think of the example of a circle. And one of the paradoxes of a circle is you can make a circle with infinite angles that all, as you just create many, many, many lines, you get closer and closer to a circle. So you can say that a circle is infinite angles. And then you can also break a line into infinite curves. It depends how finely you measure something. Or you can break a line into particles, or energy can become matter, matter can become energy. Wave patterns can turn into particles, particles can go back into waves. So we have this kind of dance with, the essential polarity of all of our framework of reality, of the masculine and feminine principle, of the wave and the particle. Now, we also know, and Dewey does a great job of this in his book, The Study of Cycles. We also know that everything is cyclical, and that there are very tiny cycles, the cycle of a second. There are cycles of millennia. There are cycles of trillions of years. There are cycles around the sun. There are cycles of expansion and contraction. There's cycles of breath. There's cycles in a marriage of closeness and falling away. There's the cycle of birth and the cycle of death. That life is a rhythm. It is a study and a pattern of cycles. And if we look at that rhythm, most of them have nothing to do with us. The age of the planet, the age of the sun, the age of your car, whatever. I mean, yes, you can sell your car, but just because you've sold it and bought a newer car, your old car still is the same age, and slowly decaying. And so there are cycles, and we are in the middle of literally trillions of cycles, most of which have very little to do with us, and in that sense are fated, are inevitable. Meaning, the orbit of Venus is not suddenly going to go off weirdly because you had an idea. But you can have an idea that partners with the reality of Venus's orbit, or you can have an idea that denies the reality of Venus's orbit. And if you have an idea that denies the reality of Venus's orbit, it will be a shorter-lived idea than the idea that is based on Venus's orbit. Because Venus's orbit doesn't change for your idea, but you have the choice to attune with these cycles. Now, here's where I'm coming back to this sense of, it all happened for the best, or a mathematical version of that. Large cyclical forces of mathematics, of energy, are in flux and are in that sense, inevitable. An asteroid at some point is going to hit the planet Earth. That's in there. That's in the space there. But it may affect one area more than another. It could be a blessing in the sense that we were just getting ready to blow ourselves up with nuclear missiles, and this just wiped out all that technology, and so very few people left, but planet starts to revegetate and clear out the CO2 we've been pumping into the air and all this. And so, it depending on perspective, things can be good or bad. And this also brings another point. There are two sides to everything. The dinosaurs going extinct prepared the way for, among other things, us. It wouldn't be very much fun being eaten and watching your friends being eaten by dinosaurs. And we are going to change and evolve and at some point become extinct in our current form. And that may happen very quickly if we listen to people like Ray Kurzweil talking about the singularity. We may voluntarily transfer a lot of our energy into machines. And this could be inevitable. And it could also be inevitable that the machines go out and create new environments for biological organisms. Depends how they're programmed and what their value hierarchy is. And we do not know for sure what the programming and function of these machines are. But let's remember that we are part of nature, and that nature is part of nature, and that the machines we create are part of reality as well. We may be the vehicles through which the Earth manufactures heavy industry and creates rockets that send patterns of nature into outer space and perhaps pollinate other planets. But this is not just our doing. Our thoughts, our evolution, our development is predicated by a variety of ecological influences, which all came from the planet. Our brains came from the planet, our thoughts came from the planet, our cultures came from the planet, our cars, the toxins that poison the planet came from the planet. So while our minds, which also came from the planet, are somewhat dissociative, meaning we like to think of ourselves as completely separate, which is a little bit of a joke, because if you'll just hold your breath for 5 minutes, you will realize that because the planet didn't give you breath, you're dead. Which means that every 5 minutes you exist only because of this planet. And the oxygen that does that came from the planet. So we pretend that there's these machines and there's these people and there's this type of person and they're bad and they had nothing to do with the planet and they're destroying the planet. Well, they are from the planet, using the planetary codes that this planet produced, using the brains this planet evolved. So it's useful to remember that, because I've grown up thinking mostly of people as being very separate from the planet, but destroying the planet. And another way of looking at that is that, sometime before this planet dies, it wants to give birth to another planet. These are all stories, by the way. The scientists have their story, and it doesn't all add up. The Christians, the Muslims, everyone has their story, and there are holes in everyone's story. Now, some stories are a lot more credible than others, and some stories are a lot more useful than others. You're never going to design a computer with the Christian story. You can design it with a scientific story, but you may never have a good dying funeral using the scientific story, and you may never have a sacred life using the scientific. It just depends what different stories are used for different things. So anyway, let's just make up a story here that, like everything else, the scientists love to talk about the basic need to procreate. Okay, let's run with that one for a little bit. So the basic need of the earth is to procreate. Well, what does that mean? Maybe it means taking a dead hunk of rock and turning it into a vibrant ecology with millions of species. Okay, so how's the earth going to do it? Well, let's say the earth gives rise to a highly technological organism. And let's say that the human being is the earth's sex organ, the organ to go and touch other celestial bodies. And so we get all excited and mine iron and develop theories and new ideas and have a renaissance and all this fun and exciting activity. Sex organs often seem to have a mind of their own. And then we rush off, build rockets, courtesy of Elon Musk and Blue Origin and stuff. We build rockets and bring biological matter from here to Mars and other places. And then this planet here at some point dies a happy camper, having given birth to a new species of planet by seeding the biological material that then replicates. And whether or not, the sex organ or the human beings of this planet die, another planet has a certain kind of life. There's a gestalt, a synergy, an orgasm of co-union. And off it goes again. And maybe one day, whether humans survive on that planet or not, stay as that planet's sex organ to keep inseminating other planets, or whether that planet creates a new thing, or whether we give birth to machines, and the machines go off with natural specimens and populate the galaxy with different things using a program created by the sex organ of this planet. And now machine life is giving birth to biological life. And the whole galaxy starts to have sex and procreate. See, the thing to realize is that we are not separate. We are not separate from the planet. The machines are not separate from us or the planet. And so a lot of it comes down to whether we see reality and the forces in play as either positive or negative, and how we partner with them to create well-being or not. So this was my theory, just to sum up here, was that the luminous symmetries, the consciousnesses of complexity, the consciousness of joy, of love, of synergy, of well-being, are waiting in a luminous field. And in that luminous field, to the degree that we open up and partner with that, is to the degree that, in a larger sense, regardless of the myopia of the human culture and its fear of the unknown and this and that and the other. When we partner with that which is unfolding, which is part of a larger system, the system not having anything to do with our positive affirmations or our curses or whatever, the revolutions of the sun, the this, the that, the progression of life's progress towards creating life on other planets. But in partnering with that, we can have more grace. And that grace is beckoning us. That life is beckoning us. Come, do it the easier way. Partner with what's going on. Understand the energies that are going on. Enjoy the dance, the moment. And that what happens, painful or otherwise for us as individuals, is as graceful as we would allow it to happen, given the momentum of objects outside of our control. And I can't buy into an old man organizing my life for the best. But that gives me something to work with.